He's many things. He's a family man. He's a dad. He is a worldwide known soccer commentator, but he does more sports than just that. It's Christian Miles joining me on the On to Something podcast. I'm Bryan Fenley, a radio and TV presenter, and this is an opportunity not just to hear what Christian is like when soccer is being involved in his life, but other elements from fatherhood to being a dad and all that good stuff. We're going to get the full spectrum of who you are, Christian. Don't be intimidated. I promise this will be fun. Excited to have you on.
Yeah, we were talking before. Come on, just don't give us the TMZ treatment, right? But hey, thanks for having me, Bryan. Big fan of what you're doing here. This series is fantastic, and just flattered that I can do this and be a part of the show.
And by the way, I love, everything about you from your hair. You were ready for this conversation. You got the gel in the hair, the lighting is good.
Well, I just got in a
Everything.
shower. I'm training for a half marathon right now. I had to get that in before the show started here. But yeah, I'm a man of meticulous preparation.
How does that meticulous preparation funnel itself in training for a half marathon?
Down to the last second, measuring every little metric possible. No, I just going out there and enjoying it. I have to be honest with you, I got talked into it by my wife, and she kind of threw down the challenge, and I couldn't back away. So we're doing it. Coming up in I think about 3 weeks. So looking forward to it. Plus, it gets me off the couch in the morning.
What is your training per day that you would do? How many miles, playing off your last name, are you running? All of that good stuff. And then to the effect of you feeling a challenge from your wife, how much does that push you to say, "Hey, I'm going to prove you wrong," or I'm going to show you what I got. I'm going to take that challenge and run with it.
Well, if anybody knows my wife, and she's about as competitive as it comes. So any throwdown is taken with the utmost seriousness because she comes a serious game. But nothing beyond just 3-4 miles a day, and then bumping it up to 5 to 6 every other day, and then trying to get a little bit of a strength training, involved resistance training, and then chasing around small children. As a lot of people know, that's a training regimen in and of itself.
How many miles have you traveled commentating soccer matches?
Oh gosh, I couldn't get. I 50,000, I guess. I mean, probably more.
Probably more, yeah.
Back in the old, I was fortunate enough to come into the broadcasting business um, in an infancy at the time when remote productions were just starting up. And this is like in the 2000s. Now they're much more commonplace and becoming much more so and prevalent as time goes by in the current modern day state of media and the way things are with streaming and remote productions, as you know. So a lot of my work was done from studio and via satellite, as we used to call it back in the day, from a studio in Los Angeles. But yeah, I've traveled throughout the United States, throughout the world, the exclusion of Asia. Basically, I've traveled throughout everywhere, covering whatever sport, mostly soccer, throughout my time in the business. And it's been a blast. I've been so lucky, so fortunate, and just enjoyed every minute of it.
What does the sport of soccer do for you, Christian, that no other sport does?
It teaches me. It's been the educator of my life. I was never a good student. I learned to have a broader perspective on things from any scope, whether it be politics, whether it be my worldview, whether it be my position at work, as a man, as a human being. And it's given me broader perspective and where I sit in things. It's taught me things. It teaches me every single time. I swear I learned something that I didn't learn before. It's been an experiment in cultural anthropology as well, where you learn pronunciations, you learn attributes of, certain regions and peoples of the world. It's been absolutely fantastic. I love to travel, but doing these games from remote is the second best thing. But anytime you can go in and do something in person, it's been an educational experience. It's just a great job to do, and I'm so very fortunate to be allowed to do it.
With everything you know and you've learned from soccer, all the life lessons, what has it taught you about what it takes to be a dad?
It takes focus. It takes a calm, it takes a broader perspective to understand things from beyond just your perspective. And it's also taught that you really need to listen. And that's the irony, I think, of being a commentator. I think the greatest commentators listen. The best interviewers listen. I think you do a wonderful job of interviewing as well. And a lot of that is reacting off people and, following up and just listening. And that's how I think that's as I said, the great irony of being a commentator, which everybody thinks you're just paid to blather and you're paid to talk, and you just go on there and you flip on a switch. And listening. I'm not just talking about listening to something audio wise. You're reading, you're learning, you're absorbing information, and you try and incorporate that and to deliver the best message and commentary possible. I think that's been the probably the best lesson that I've learned.
What I hear from you, Christian, is a man that is always learning and has this insatiable appetite for wanting to learn not just sports and obviously hours and hours a week are dedicated to research of the contemporary happenings of soccer and other sports that you're calling, but you seem to be, even though you admitted to me that you weren't the best student, that there is this perpetual scholar in you, whether that's learning something from traveling, whether that's learning something about the sport or current events. That love of learning, how do you find that that applies not just in broadcasting, but just in everyday life in everything you do?
I think a curiosity is what fuels people and motivates people, and it's kind of at the core of anybody that's involved in media. And I think trying to pursue the whys, trying to understand. I think that's kind of at the essence, at the core of it. And you can apply it, through a vast degree of arenas, whether it be your personal life, whether it be in your professional life or anything. So yeah, I just, and I scholarly, I wouldn't characterize myself as such. I do appreciate it, but just an enduring curiosity as to why things are and why this is such, and the reasoning behind it, the etymology behind certain things. It's just really interesting to me. It always has been. And I also just chalk it up to being a straight up inner nerd of me as well. So there's that.
What is nerddom, if that's a word? What does that look like for you?
For me, I mean, now it's almost cool in the modern day, jargon and lingo of things. But to me, it's just meticulous. It's about being detailed and doing everything that you can within your power to give the best of yourself, whatever that is, whether it's being a father, whether it's being an interviewer, whether it's being a commentator, anything across, any arena that we come across. But being detailed, it wasn't something that it was something that I really had to learn. It didn't come naturally. And some things come too early for people, like it did for me earlier in my career. And I had to learn through going through processes of preparing for games, doing games, and learning, hey, I can prepare this better. I can do this better. So I need to research this a little more. I need to learn background on this a little more. I need to watch game video or personal video, whatever it may be, just to take that extra step. Because I always think, once you think you've got a process down, which is great to have as your fundamental base, but there's always something more you can try. And maybe it doesn't work, but maybe it does. And you incorporate that. And that becomes part of your regimen and preparation. You always continually expand to learn and grow.
But not everybody has that openness to do that. They get set in their ways and they get comfortable. I don't know if complacent's the right word, but they develop a methodology to what they're doing and they don't change. For you to see through that, what does it take for you, even from the beginning of your career, to notice that, like, this isn't probably the best route for me? I need to be open. I need to be open to change.
I think complacency, I think, is a very good way to describe it, Brian, to be honest with you. I think you hit the nail on the head. I think it takes failures. It's not to sound cliche, but it's how you respond to failure. And there's a lot of failure in this business, to be quite frank. And as much as the successes are great, the failures are even better, in my opinion. They've taught me more about not just the craft that I'm in, but about myself, about your character, and how you respond to that, and what you learn, and how you can correct that and go. It's, trial by fire in a lot of ways. And being in a public arena as we are in, your mistakes are magnified and amplified tenfold, hundredfold. So you feel that much more, because when we make a mistake, it's there for the whole world to see. And, the finger pointing comes your way, and rightfully so if you do make a mistake. And so it teaches you, hey, it teaches you accountability, and you want to, everybody wants to be the best version of themselves. And I believe to do that, you want to mitigate any possibility of making a mistake and prepare and do things that the best way possible.
With all of that said, and as you mentioned, there's an extra pressure to want to get everything right. And that's so important when it comes to stats, when it comes to presentation, because what you're saying is being magnified. Many, many people are seeing this. And when we get something wrong, as you said, we're going to get called out for it. With that drive to be at our best as a broadcaster, to get everything correct, at the same time, we are human, and until we become robots, nothing is ever going to be perfect in our eyes. How are you gentle with yourself, or how hard is it to be gentle with yourself when, say, you go back and you watch a broadcast that you did and you're like, I just wish I could have said that word instead of that word? To where, does it sit with you for a while? And if so, how long? As you go back and you listen and you watch your material, when is it hard to be gentle on yourself, and when is it easier to be gentle on yourself?
It's a very good question. I think any good media person with their salt will watch themselves. It was really painful to do early on, because let's be honest, the earlier in your career, the less proficient you are in your skill and in your career. And now, listening to myself, it was really difficult. I liken it to back in the day when you record a voiceover message on the voice message, and then you go back and listen to it, and like, that's what I sound like. The way we sound to ourselves is much different than what I sound like to others. And it can be painful, downright painful. I'll be honest. It's been brutal, and I'm one that's fairly hard on myself, and that's my source of motivation to be better. But it is difficult, and there's sometimes where you walk away from a game and like, man, I did great. I called a really good game. Come home and pop up with a beer or whatever and watch it, and I didn't. I wasn't at my best. I wasn't as good as I thought I was. And that's humbling. And that is motivation to be better. And then conversely, there's times where I've, come out of the booth or come out of the stadium and just like, oh, that was horrible. And I come home and, oh, it wasn't so bad. Actually, it was pretty good. So it's difficult. The objectivity in the heat of the moment and calling the game and being on air is totally different than sitting back and retrospectively looking at it. I tend to be hypercritical of myself, and I think it's important for people to review their work and learn from it, but don't beat yourself up, because if you do that, that's a road of ruin. You can really, hurt your motivation, your self-esteem, your sense of self, and ultimately that's what's going to get you through in this business. Because as you know, Bryan, you have to be thick-skinned. There's going to be a lot of bumps and bruises, and a lot of critics and people that want to tear you down on the way, but you're going to need to be thick-skinned. You're going to need to have that ability to learn, pick yourself back up and get right back at it and be that much better.
You said it, Christian. There is that fine line between self-evaluation but not self-torment, and it's
Yeah.
not an easy thing. And I think that what you share is a common denominator for so many in this industry, because they realize that perfection is what we're all striving for, but in the end, perfection is unattainable because none of us are perfect. What I am really enthralled about with you is you talk about game calling, but then you in the studio and you on the desk, and let's say you're doing a roundtable discussion and you're hosting something like that. When you're going into the intro and you're opening up a show, what are the do's for Christian Miles when you've got maybe a couple analysts next to you, you're opening up a show as the host? What are you trying to get across to lure people in when you're hosting a show on television?
You want to get the audience excited about what you're about to present, whether it be the game, the impact of the game, the significance of the game, a show, whether the significance of your guests, and whatever. You want to get that excitement in. I remember being a kid in way back, and I every Monday night, my dad and I would watch Monday Night Football, and it was chili night with my dad. And we'd get so excited. And I made sure that my dad, it came on at 7 o'clock where I lived. And I made sure my dad and I had everything all set up. You had our bowl of chili right for the TV at 6:55 because that it couldn't be any later than that. Because I loved the opening to Monday Night Football. The drama, especially going back to the Howard Cosell days, the drama that man could conjure up, get me so excited. I was staring wide-eyed as a young boy watching, the Pittsburgh Steelers, who were my team at the time, or still is my team, and get so excited. That's kind of that feeling that I want a viewer or a listener to feel, to get excited about the game, and part of that is the tease and the lead up, but getting them amplified, but not over delivering and presenting something and promising something that's not going to come to fruition at the same time, and being honest with the viewer is so important as it is to get them excited about what they're going to watch. And that's kind of a balance you try for. So getting them excited, getting them interested, getting them excited to watch this game and this show is paramount, is job one.
Job one, or at least one of the earliest of jobs, it's not really a job, although it is. When you went to college, and if I'm not mistaken, at Portland State, you were there. And if I have your major correct, it was speech communication and rhetoric. And I would think that having a good idea of rhetoric as you're growing and building a younger version of you in the industry, to use rhetoric to self-market yourself, to go into those rooms and say, hey, my name is Christian Miles. I have what it takes. I'm only going to grow and get better. Take a chance on me. Using that rhetoric and what you learned from college as a persuasive tool to get people on board with what you're doing and your vision and where you're going. Where did you go for grabbing some of that material?
I think we learn from our peers. Like I mentioned, watching sports program. I've been a sports fan my whole life, and whether it be traditional mainstream American sports and later on soccer, just learning and absorbing, watching other shows, watching games from England, watching old Monday Night Football games from the 1970s, 1980s, and 90s. And now the new advent of streaming and everything, which I think has kind of brought a more of a free form approach. That's interesting too. And going back to college days, it's, you learn the theories of communications and the history of it. But it's something that you just kind of, extrapolate all of these sources and bundle it into one package for yourself, and then, spit it back out in the best possible way that how. And I don't know if there's a set criteria or a method that you do. I think it's just living the life of that you have up until that point, to that very point of that moment that you're on air and calling the game or delivering the show or doing your interview or whatever it is that you're doing. So all those culmination of experiences come to fruition at that moment.
And those culmination of experiences have played itself into what you're doing now, obviously with Apple and Fox and all these other networks that you're working with, calling not just soccer, you call other sports as well. When did it's got to be so hard when in an industry that is 24/7, it's around the clock, you're traveling, you're all over the place, to have a family. That seems to be, especially when you're growing and building up, Christian, that would be so hard, I would think, to do, because you're throwing yourself into your craft, and it's not a 9 to 5 Monday through Friday. When did it feel right for you to say, hey, I still can do the sports stuff. I'm going to continue to immerse myself and dive into that head first, but now I feel like I have time to be a father and be a family man and add that element to your life?
The time was right. My wife said it was okay to do it. but yeah, that's a great question too, Brian. And anybody knows this. It's out there in the media world watching. It knows how difficult it is and how hard it is on a spouse and how difficult it is in a family. There's, we miss ball games, we miss birthday parties, we miss wedding receptions. There's all kinds of things that you miss because these sports, these events traditionally are taking place during those times when those great moments of raising your children are taking place as well. And that is a tough one. And sometimes you have to say no and evaluate, as hard as it is. And it's about priorities. And I'm fortunate enough to have a wife that understands what I do. We've She's known since we started dating to now 17 years of marriage and raising two beautiful daughters, and they become the priority. And I do what I can. I don't travel like I did back in my 20s, but there is a fair amount of traveling, and that's part and parcel part of the trade. And you learn to juggle it, and you just basically fly by the seat of your pants on your personal life to make that professional life work for both of you. And it's not just you yourself; it's a team effort with the whole family. And I think it's a wonderful way for me personally. I've been able to take my daughters to school and pick them up from school and help them with their homework and go through the everyday mundanity and wonderful moments that you have raising children, and also enjoying those moments on the weekends that we were just discussing. So for me, it works great. It's not for everybody. It's not easy. I Any scenario where you're trying to raise kids and have a family is difficult in many different respects. But for me, this is working, and I continue on the course that I am for as long as I can, and just enjoy the moments, because the kids will be gone one day, and I'll still be doing the same thing probably because that's what I love to do.
Well, one of the things that you do love to do is after this conversation, you are going to pick up one of your daughters from school. And when that happens and you start to engage in conversation with her, what is that like? Like if I'm sitting in the backseat of your car and I see the smile on your face as you're picking up one of your daughters from school, and then you have a conversation, where are we going with that conversation?
Just you can go anywhere. I mean, there's good days or bad days. It just depends on what your 6-year-old and your 10-year-old are feeling at the time, and how there were days were at school. And just like anything any other parents goes through, the trials and tribulations of being a child and growing up, and asking how your day was. Where do you want to go for lunch? You want to go home? Should we have a special treat day or whatever, go to the park, whatever. My children are very young right now, and I'm just trying to enjoy this time while I can. As I'm finding out with my older daughter, who's going to be 11 this year, that those times are starting to come to an end. And it's going to be sooner than later. So I'm just trying to relish and enjoy those moments while I can right now.
Relishing the moments that they have you in helping them with their homework. Where does Christian Miles find himself most helpful when it comes to his daughter's homework?
Staying out of it mostly. Just telling her to go do it,
Yeah.
and talk to the tutor. It's difficult. I feel like I'm in school again. Like any parent will tell you, if you sit down and really engage and try and help your kid through difficult thing. I'll tell you what, fourth grade math is a lot harder now than it was when I was in fourth grade. It just you're in a sense kind of going to school all over again, but just trying to help them in the best way possible. And patience is a huge attribute that you need to get through it, because it will be tested, as any parent knows. And just trying to give the best of yourself that you can best help your child get through whatever it is they need to get through. And that's the bottom line. And if that means sitting down and dropping everything that you're doing, and doing my match prep for a game that's coming up on Saturday, if I have to do it at 10 o'clock at night till midnight, so I can help my child with getting ready for a math test or a science project or whatever, then that's what it takes. It's part of that juggling of life.
Well, Christian, I love all of what you just said. As we wrap up this conversation, from helping out your oldest daughter doing homework in fourth grade as she is, to being a grade A parent, a grade A broadcaster, to being able to show us a little bit more of what your life is like, really was a treat to hear the perspective. I think a lot of our colleagues who watch this are going to be like, oh, I didn't know Christian came in the clutch with homework with his children. So that's what I love about these conversations. We go places that are really unique and fun. And thanks so much, Christian. I'm Bryan Fenley, for taking us down those roads and learning about a side of you that perhaps not a lot of people know about, but really is important. And I'm glad we went there.
Brian, just don't ask me about new math, but seriously, it was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.